Okay, our purpose today is to discuss the major federal income tax provisions that apply to private non-industrial forest landowners. And our objective is to provide you with information, not legal advice, to prepare your federal income tax return that has forestry applications, whether you prepare your own return or you pay someone else to do your return for you. A couple of years ago, I read a statistic that said 52% of individual taxpayers pay someone else to do their taxes for them. And the reason for this are many, but one of the best reasons is that professional tax preparers generally give you a better return. In other words, you pay less taxes. And the reason we want to do this is help you to avoid paying unnecessary taxes through proper tax planning, and many landowners pay far too much in unnecessary taxes, and by doing that it will enable you to earn more income from your forest operations. And here are some basic facts. First of all, taxes are a major cost of doing business. Some landowners will tell you they think it's the major cost of doing business. And proper tax planning is every bit as important as the cultural techniques used to grow a profitable stand of timber. I'm a forester. I'm a silviculturist by background. I love to talk about cultural treatments, and foresters generally like to talk about these things. But the other part of the equation is you have to talk about the economics. And it's very important to understand the implications brought on by taxes. Congress has provided several favorable advantages in elections to stimulate increased productivity from the nation's private forest lands. And if you're a landowner, I'm sure you probably don't think of yourself as being a timber baron, but you're perceived as such by many people out there in the general public because you get these special tax advantages. Well, the reason you get these special tax advantages is that Congress is concerned about the overall health of the nation's forests. And so they provide these advantages in elections to stimulate increased productivity from the nation's forest lands. I like to do a little aside right here. I call this Civics 101 just to make sure that we all understand that we're working off the same page here. It gets very basic. I'm going back to the 9th grade. I grew up in Florida. I call it Civics 101. Remember, there are 3 branches of the federal government. Congress writes the law in the legislative branch. Congress writes the law, and the President signs the law into the Internal Revenue Code. Sometimes you'll hear the term, the President proposes and Congress disposes. But as George Bush told the press the other day, I do not write the law. Congress has to write the law. But yet when he ran for office, he said he was going to change the tax law. Well, the way he changes the tax law is he has to charge Congress to draft the legislation. And fortunately for him, he has a majority in the House and the Senate, and he will probably get some tax legislation that he would like to see. But in the process, he's going to have 535 people in the mix, and it's going to be very contentious, and he's going to end up probably seeing some stuff he doesn't want to see. Then we have the executive branch of government, and that's basically, we're talking about here, the Department of Treasury, and in the Department of Treasury, this is the Internal Revenue Service. Interprets the code into action through regulations, revenue rulings, private letter rulings, technical advice, memoranda, and other things. So the IRS does not make the rules. They do not make the law, or I should say they interpret the law, and then from that they make the rules. But they are bound by the law. You'll hear people just really fulminating against the IRS. The IRS this, the IRS that. But you've got to remember, the IRS is carrying out the law. They're executing the law that was drafted by Congress and signed by the President. Finally, if the taxpayer has exhausted all means with the IRS and does not have a satisfactory conclusion, they can appeal to the 3rd branch of the government, the legislative branch. And in this, cases are brought by taxpayers after they've exhausted all other means with the Internal Revenue Service. And today we're probably going to discuss a few court cases that were brought against the Internal Revenue Service, and they changed their position. They changed their interpretation. And I just want to throw this out. We probably don't have any tax preparers with us today. Because of these special tax provisions for forestry operations, because they're very obscure, most professional tax preparers are unfamiliar with these special rules. So if you're a forest landowner and your position is, well, I don't need to worry too much about the taxes, I have an accountant that handles all of that, you may be lulling yourself into a false sense of security, because your accountant may not be aware of these very obscure rules. And I want to say right now, I've been a tax preparer myself. The code is very broad, and I have yet to see anyone that knows all the ins and outs of the Internal Revenue Code. So you want to make sure that your tax preparer or accountant is familiar with these rules. And the best way to do that is to take some of the information you've got here with you when you go to have your taxes done. And our reference today is going to be Ag Handbook 718, the Forest Owner's Guide to the Federal Income Tax. You have a copy of it right here. This is the Bible that we're going to be referring to. It was published in 2001, so it is a little out of date, but it's mostly things like changes in the capital gains rates. The basic philosophy in how you deal with your forestry operations are included in this book. Now, occasionally you may hear someone say, well, this is not a valid document to go to because it's not published by the IRS. Well, that's not true. I've heard people in the IRS say that. This document is the reference document on IRS Form T. They will tell you that this is the document to consult. Also, this publication was reviewed extensively by the Internal Revenue Service. So, as Harry Haney says, this document constitutes substantive authority with the IRS. And there is a statement on the front page right here. The Office of the Chief Counsel, the Internal Revenue Service, reviewed the manuscript and made many valuable suggestions, et cetera, et cetera. By the way, one of the authors is here, John Green. The other person I referred to was Harry Haney. He's one of the other authors of the last handbook, of this handbook. And we are in the process, as I understand, starting to revise this publication. John is going to be the leader on the next go-around on this revised publication. You can buy this publication from the U.S. government bookstore. It's $21 per copy. I wouldn't advise you to go out and buy this because it is available on the internet, unless you just want, well, you don't need one. You've already got one right here. $21 right here. I don't know what you paid for this course, but here's $21 right there. And here's some information that's on the internet. First of all is a Forest Service website. This is the national website that deals with our state and private arena. It has all the Forest Service tax publications, and that would include this publication here, and you can go in there and download pages or whatever if you want to give it to your accountant. And also another website is the Internal Revenue Service website, which is an excellent website. How many of you have gone to this website?
I have a question.
Yeah.
This was 1995. Is this still pretty up to date? I mean, always changing the tax laws. They're always interpreting things.
I'm showing 2001.
Is this still?
This one is 2001. Well, it replaced the 1995 publication.
So basically it's pretty up to date.
Basically, it's pretty up to date, but there have been changes in the law since then, and we're going to go over those changes. So, you know, there are old capital gains rates which were current in 2001. So, you need to be aware of this. Getting back to the IRS website, you can go to the IRS website and get all their publications and all their forms, and they have a whole bunch of other things in there. But one thing that they have on this website is probably the most obscure form the rarest form probably in the whole Internal Revenue Service. It's Form T, Timber, or Forest Activity Schedules. And John is going to be going with you in painful detail over this soon. And this, you get into a lot of things with your tax preparer at times, because the tax preparer has probably never heard of it. It used to be when you call the IRS on their forms hotline to ask for this form, the people on the other end of the line would tell you we don't have such a form, but indeed they do. And now you can find it on the website. And our position is that you should be maintaining a Form T. You may run into a little bit of trouble with your tax preparer on that, though. Okay, here are the 3 taxation specialists in the USDA Forest Service, and we're all here today. Me, Neil Bungard, John Green. We used to have Lloyd Casey, but he retired a year and a half ago. So out of 35,000 people in the Forest Service, we have 3 people working in taxation half-time. So we have the commitment from the U.S. Forest Service of 1.5 persons working in taxation. So it's pretty obscure field. Okay, here are the rules of the workshop for today. Darren's already gone over some of them. Rule number 1, do not concentrate too hard on this material, because if you do, you're going to have a big headache by the time we get to lunch. Rule number 2, feel free to ask questions at any time. The only thing we would like to ask you to do is to ask the questions at the right time. In other words, early on, somebody may have a question about timber sales or something. We're going to go over timber sales later on. So we may put you off and say, well, could you hold that question until we cover that later on today? And rule number 3, relax and enjoy this as much as possible. I like to tell people to just sort of let this stuff wash over you gently. You're going to leave today with a lot of information in writing. A lot of this stuff may not apply to you right now. Later on, it might apply to you. But you'll be well armed with a lot of information, and you should be able to answer probably 95% or more of your tax questions that apply to forestry by the time you leave here today. Maybe not off the top of your head, but you'll find it in the book here. And this is our ultimate objective. We're going to hope to prevent this, where Mr. Figby is being audited by the IRS. It says the IRS, 10 auditors, no waiting. And the auditor says this is the express lane for open and shut cases, Mr. Figby. So yours is not going to be an open and shut case. And in fact, if you follow the stuff, follow the information that we give you today, you're probably going to be well ahead of an auditor if you ever get audited.